the good news for Canadians who are tired of living under Justin Trudeau is that March 26th deadline is extremely firm, barring a side deal with the NDP or the Bloc, barring one of the other opposition parties. The government won't survive March 26th.
With all of the speculation and misinformation flying around on social media about what can and will happen as we approach the March 24th deadline for prorogation, we've decided to ask the most qualified person that we could think of to answer our questions. Ladies and gentlemen, we present the former Speaker of the House of Commons, current House Leader for the Conservative Party, and procedural expert extraordinaire, the Honourable Andrew Scheer.
Let's take a look. Andrew Scheer, welcome to Northern Perspective.
Thanks very much for having me on your show.
It's a real pleasure having you. We are perpetual fans of your knowledge of procedure in the House. It is, I think, one of the greatest things for us because we're procedure nerds, as a lot of people that watch our channel know. It's really entertaining for us when we're watching question period or debate and something happens procedurally and you just seem to get that glint in your eye, and then something gets pulled out of the toolbox and it just completely surprises either Speaker Greg Fergus when he's trying to do something he shouldn't, or the Liberals. So it's something else to see you in action, and we tell a lot of people that we are so pleased that you are essentially Pierre's right hand in the House, because you know the stuff inside and out. You're a former Speaker of the House, and it's just great to have somebody that doesn't let the Liberals get an inch in the House. So we just want to thank you on behalf of our viewers for that.
Well, thank you, Maris. That is very high praise, and it's a role I'm very honored that Pierre has allowed me to have this role. It's something I enjoy a great deal. As you mentioned, coming from the Speaker's chair, there are a few days here and there where I can have a bit of an edge on whichever Liberal thinks they can do something that they can't, or forgets that there's a tool that we can use to slow them down. So I have a lot of fun. I really enjoy the dynamic working with our leader and with the rest of the caucus.
So this is a period where I would say even back to October, where it's been unprecedented in the House of Commons. We have the Liberal government once again trying to block the release of documents that has been lawfully ordered by Parliament, and they have tried to ignore parliamentary supremacy yet again. Last time they even took Anthony Rota to court, as I know you know. This has led to Parliament to being completely seized, and inevitably to Justin Trudeau resigning and then proroguing Parliament. Now, there's a lot of wild speculation going on social media about, what this means, what's likely, what's going to happen. We'll start with the first bit. So Justin Trudeau prorogued Parliament. We believe that he unintentionally let it slip during his resignation speech, since all of his papers flew away as he was trying to speak, that one of the core reasons that he prorogued was to allow a Liberal leadership race to occur. And this has been the subject of scrutiny by the JCCF, who is now moving to challenge it in court. From a procedural perspective, what do you think about that court challenge? Do you think it is likely? Because even that challenge is unprecedented at this point. And are the Conservatives ready either way?
Great question. It's very. I think we should take a step back and just think about why we are where we are. Like, even considering a judicial review of a prorogation is something that I don't believe has ever happened in Canada before. And I think it speaks to the chaos that Trudeau has caused he's done a few things. First, making a deal with the NDP to prop his government up. That's not something Canadians voted for. In fact, quite the opposite. Both Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh promised during the election that they would not have any kind of a coalition. So they lied to Canadians. They clearly don't have a mandate for the coalition they had together, because they specifically promised not to do it. And then we saw Jagmeet Singh pretend to rip up the deal with the Liberals back in September, only to go back and vote time again to keep Justin in office. And then when that was finally too much for then, after it was clear that he would keep the government in power long enough to qualify for his pension in February, then he started to make noise about how he was going to vote this government out. So what Trudeau has done with the timing on all this is he has left our country in an unprecedented situation where we have a long prorogation after he announces his intention to resign, while we're dealing with an existential threat from the U.S. administration on tariffs. And he's left his own party in a very chaotic situation. The very short timeline to find a replacement, and in all likelihood heading into election. So I'm not enough of a constitutional lawyer, but my expertise is more House of Commons procedure than it is constitutional law, and whether or not advice to the Governor General can be unlawful, whether or not the Governor General can have decisions like this be reviewed. I'm not an expert on that, but I think the fact that we're even having this conversation, the fact that Canadians are even learning about some of these things in real time at such a critical moment in our country's history, just speaks to the narcissism and ego of Justin Trudeau clinging on to power like this. If he had decided in November or October that he was going to step down, at least there would have been a longer period of time. Wouldn't have left Parliament in that type of. Better yet, if he had called an election, if he had said, "Look, it's not just me as Liberal leader that Canadians are going to pass judgment on; they're going to pass judgment on the Liberal Party, on the policies that every single Liberal MP has voted for the past 9 years." So it's not about whose name is on the posters, whose face is on the posters. It's about the policies that the party stands for. Let's take that to the Canadian people. Let's let them have it say, so we can have some certainty and a government with a clear and fresh mandate. So that's kind of the stage that we approach these questions with, was a desperate prime minister clinging to power who clung on so long that he's left Parliament and his country in the lurch, once again proving that it's never been about the Canadian people. It's always been about his own ego and his own pride.
So I guess a different question might be, when it comes to prorogation, are there rules, like parliamentary rules, as to what a prime minister can or cannot prorogue Parliament for? Or maybe they've never needed rules in the past because they've always been implied.
Another great question. There have been some developments in the UK where there have been judicial reviews of prorogations, and that has changed the nature of what the prime minister in the mother parliament can do. Yes and no. To answer your question, yes and no. There are not so much rules about what the government can do during a prorogation. There's more constraints around the timeline of prorogations. The big issue is what we in procedural nerd terms we call supply. And supply is Parliament granting the authority to the government to spend money. And when you think about it, that is why Parliament came to exist back in, if you think back to the Magna Carta and 1215 and all the developments of our system, it's been about the people who are paying the taxes having a say on how the taxes are spent, and whether or not the government can collect taxes and what they spend it on has to be ratified by representatives of the people. So there are periods throughout the calendar year where the House of Commons has to grant that supply, grant that spending authority to the government. Otherwise, literally, they would not be allowed to spend the money. There would be no legal authority for any department to provide a grant, to pay salaries for civil servants. And so the constraint that Justin Trudeau is facing was that the end of this supply period that we're in right now is March 26th. So that's why we have, if you're wondering where do you get the date March 24th from, well, that's to bring Parliament back with enough time to grant supply. I don't believe, speculating because I wasn't involved in the conversations, but I don't believe it would have been possible really for the Governor General to grant a prorogation past that date because it's from April 1 until the time as Parliament did get back together and grant supply, the federal government wouldn't be able to spend money on a whole host of issues, and that would have truly been an unprecedented situation in Canada. We've never had a government shut down like they do in some other countries, and so again, running up and knowing that supply period was hanging out there was one of the reasons why Justin Trudeau had the timeline that he did. But again, it speaks to that this is the worst possible option. He could have called an election in early January. We would have had vote by February. A new government could have recalled Parliament and still met with that timeline. So he's chosen the worst of all options to deal with the constraints of prorogation. While the House is prorogued, no new spending can be issued. During election periods, the Governor General can use special warrants to keep funding the government. That doesn't apply during prorogation. So could not have prorogued past that 26th of March deadline and just relied on these special warrants because it's illegal to use those during a prorogation. So there are constraints around timelines and guidelines. Those constraints would probably inform the Governor General's decision on how long and when to prorogue. But that's essentially it.
And when it comes to, I would say, Canadians' anxiety, the other, I would say, concern that we hear a lot is how much damage can Justin Trudeau do, before the election happens? And our understanding is that, well, obviously, no new legislation can be enacted because Parliament is not in session and you need a parliamentary vote and the Senate to actually ratify that. And in terms of spending, you've already addressed that. So really the only thing that he can do is issue orders in council, but even that is extremely limited, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. Any order in council that is possible because of existing legislation, he would be able to issue. So if a law grants the power to the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister to make almost an executive order, call them orders of council here, if that statutory permission already exists, then he carries that power to take. But you're touching on what I believe is a very important point to focus on during this period of prorogation, and that is what might be legal might not be legitimate, and just because the way our system has evolved over 150 years, and just because no sane prime minister and sane governing party before this one contemplated the scenario that we're in right now, doesn't mean that it's right. And so we have a situation where in Canada, our whole principle on whether or not a government has the moral legitimacy, the kind of democratic legitimacy to govern is, does it maintain the confidence of the House? The elected representatives, people coming together, the House of Commons, we express confidence in government in a variety of ways. One of them is spending bills, taxation bills, and we have a situation in Canada where the majority of the parties, the parties representing the majority of members of the House of Commons, have all declared non-confidence in this government. So Parliament isn't sitting. Justin Trudeau has he has robbed members of Parliament of their ability to express non-confidence and trigger that election, which would put the question back to the game. He has shut down Parliament and blocked us from using that tool, that critical piece of Canadian parliamentary democracy, to basically pass judgment on whether or not the government is legitimate, whether or not it has the confidence of the House of Commons. So he's blocked Parliament, prevented that from happening, while at the same time he has stepped down, or at least announced his intention to step down. So here we have a situation where it is clear that the majority of members of Parliament in the House of Commons do not want this government. If Justin Trudeau starts to exercise the powers that he retains as Prime Minister, he will be doing so in a period of time where it is not, he cannot be certain, he cannot prove, he cannot show that he's got the confidence of the House of Commons. And so that is an unprecedented situation that he's put the country in. And I believe that is something that he would be, he would certainly be, it would certainly be an affront to democracy if in this period of time he started to issue new edicts through orders and councils or things of that nature. So, it's something that we're going to obviously have to pay attention to. But I can understand why people are anxious, because looking at his track record and the types of moves he's made, even while the House was sitting, and some of the terrible policies he's inflicted, I think Canadians are right to be concerned about it.
Well, and something that kind of crossed my mind as you were talking about the fact that it's now common knowledge that all of the opposition parties are ready to vote this government down, have lost confidence. As a speaker, would you qualify this as a breach of privilege?
This is a very very, very good. You guys are asking great questions that I kind of, those intersections between kind of constitutional law and House of Commons procedure. Unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, because of how Justin Trudeau is playing with the system right now. A prorogation is not something that the speaker has any control over, any use on. It's something that's purely between the Prime Minister, the Governor General, and then ultimately the Canadian people. If they believe that the Prime Minister used that power, then they render judgment on him in the next election. So it's not really something that comes under the purview of the speaker, unless it affects issues like that supply period, and then it would be pertinent to the speaker on procedural grounds if a prorogation ever interfered with or crossed those lines. We might have to consider some of that. But again, if the Prime Minister ever did something like that, it would be a massive problem on the other side, on the kind of government operations side.
So, enough of the hypothetical. Let's deal within the what's most likely going to happen. Given that we can't predict what's going to happen in court, are they going to treat this as an urgent case or not? And even if they did, are they going to find in favor of the JCCF and overturn the prorogation? So let's just assume that things are going to play out as they are. A Parliament is going to return on the 24th. Whether or not they have a speech from the throne right away, that is almost irrelevant, because that March 26th confidence vote is coming, and all indications are that the government will fall on the 26th, and we're going to an election. Is that the understanding of the Conservative Party and even the other opposition parties?
Yeah, I find that kind of predicting and planning on what will happen when you're dealing with a guy like Justin Trudeau and with people like Jagmeet Singh, it's a little bit like quantum mechanics. Like I can give you probabilities, but I can't give you too many certainties. But look, if we take everyone at face value, if we suspend our disbelief about liberal hypocrisy and NDP lies, and we just say, okay, well, everyone is going to do what they have said they're going to do. We've been very clear, and we have a proven track record of doing what we say we'll do, especially with Pierre Poilievre as our leader now. And we've been voting non-confidence in this government for quite some time, and not just on spending issues or taxation issues, voting against quadrupling of the tax hike, voting against their constant tax increases in every budget they brought forward, but also with specific non-confidence motions. So we are very clear we're going to vote non-confidence. If we take Jagmeet Singh and Mr. Bosch at face value and say they will too, and if we take the Liberals at face value and say that yes, Parliament will be reconvened on March 4th, then if all those scenarios play out, then the most likely outcome is we have the speech from the throne on the 24th, some kind of debate on the 25th, probably a response to the speech from the throne, which for parliamentary watchers, they know that when the Governor General comes to deliver the speech from the throne, the House of Commons responds, usually with a message back to the Governor General, and that is a conference in and of itself. But that will run up against the March 26th date that we talked about, which is the supply date. And that's the day that Parliament has to have an opposition motion debate and then have votes on government spending. And those would all be compensations. So probably the most likely scenario, if everything happens the way people commit to doing, House reconvenes 24th, some kind of a debate on the 25th, and then a conference from the 26th, where, if, as I said, if all parties say to do what they say they will do, we'll defeat the government. The reason why I say that's the most probable is because there are, we saw with Jagmeet Singh. I don't trust him. I don't believe just because he said it today that he'll do it on March 26th. And I think Canadians who live in NDP held ridings should use this opportunity to reach out to their NDP MPs and to let NDP candidates in their area know that if Jagmeet Singh does a 180 on this, swallows us a poll, that they will remember that and hold the NDP to account for basically being liars. So that's something that could change if all of a sudden Jagmeet Singh flip flops. There's nothing to say that the new leader of the Liberal Party who becomes Prime Minister doesn't call an election earlier or change the date. So an incoming Prime Minister will have some options available, but the good news for Canadians who are tired of living under Justin Trudeau is that March 26th deadline is extremely firm, and barring a side deal with the NDP or the Bloc, barring one of the other opposition parties, the government won't survive March 26th.
Well, and just from a political strategy point of view, if either one of those parties decided to side with the Trudeau government now, I think it would probably go down as one of the worst political strategic decisions in Canadian history right before an election year. So as much as we may not understand the logic or lack of logic behind what the NDP does or doesn't do, at some point they are going to be slaves to political strategy at some point. So.
Well, I agree, and I never understood why Jagmeet Singh has allowed this to go on for so long, because he's so tied to Trudeau's policies. Justin Trudeau would not have been able to do anything in this last parliament or the parliament before that, for that matter, without the support of the NDP. So remember, in 2019, when I was leader of the party and I was warning Canadians that Justin Trudeau was going to hike the carbon tax beyond what it was back then, Liberals were saying, he's making stuff up, we're never going to hike it. Well, he lied. Trudeau lied and proceeded to, he's well on his way to quadrupling the carbon tax, much, much higher than he originally promised Canadians. Well, that was not possible without Jagmeet Singh standing beside him all along the way. All the policies that doubled housing costs, the soft on crime bills that gave dangerous and repeat offenders easy bail, it's all supported by the NDP. And just pure political strategy, I was always expecting that at some point the NDP would try to separate themselves from Justin Trudeau and Andrew, but pretend like there was some kind of distance between them, that they weren't essentially the same party with the same ideology. And he hasn't done that. He spent all fall propping up Justin Trudeau and voting in favor of his budgets, his spending authorities and key pieces of Liberal legislation. So I agree with you that I believe Canadians will severely punish a political party that rushes to the rescue of a corrupt and tired Liberal government that has inflicted so much pain and misery on Canadians. If that has to continue for a few more months because Jagmeet Singh gets cold feet and is afraid of going to the Canadian people, I believe he's going to pay an even worse price than he already is for propping up Justin Trudeau.
Well, hopefully Smithers separates himself from Mr. Burns at some point, and maybe Jagmeet Singh is measuring an imperial when it comes to distance versus metric, so he's just a little confused. But
That's right.
in any case, thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Scheer, and clarifying some of this stuff for Canadians. It can be a little complicated when it comes to government, but that's our mission here at Northern Perspective, to drop the veil and educate Canadians as to how their government works so they can continue to hold their government officials to account.
Great. Well, I hope I cleared up some of the confusion out there. But if anybody watching still, isn't quite sure, don't feel bad. This is not normal for Canadian governments, and it's just a testament to the chaos and uncertainty that not just Justin Trudeau, but the Liberals themselves have caused. If I could just close on one note, I just want to point out how difficult it is to stomach these Liberal MPs that went out in November, December, and early January calling on Justin Trudeau to resign, when they were there every step along the way, voting in favor, applauding, and doing nothing about Justin Trudeau's leadership when they could have saved Canadians some of this chaos. They could have done this a year ago in May before the American election. There were many points along the way, but they didn't. And like I said, they're there supporting Justin Trudeau, cheering him on, voting in favor. The problem is not just Justin Trudeau, it's Liberal policies. None of that will really change. When you look at the Liberal leadership candidates right now, Christine Freeland, Mark Carbon Tax, Carney, they were key architects of the Liberal agenda. Christine Freeland was Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance for several of the last budgets that have all raised taxes and caused inflation and interest rates. And Mark Carney is Justin Trudeau's senior economic advisor today. So the problem is with the Liberal Party and the Liberal policies. And for Canadians who feel a little bit overwhelmed with the chaos and uncertainty, just know it's not normal. And life wasn't like this in Canada before Justin Trudeau, and it won't be like this after.